All right, it is Friday. We're back in with Matt, part 2 of the art of self-improvement. We really dive into kind of more of his life a little bit, anime in the gym, and some different cool topics. So awesome conversation. Thank you, Matt, for coming on. Really just got a flow during this conversation and really was one of the most enjoyable conversations I've had. Excited to build this momentum. And yeah, that's episode 13. So let's tune into it. Boom. I'm your host, Paul McCarran, and the whole thing with the process, it's the process of me gaining knowledge and gaining wisdom. My guests are going to provide the knowledge and the wisdom, and I'm doing work at the same time to gain knowledge and wisdom. Process of 2 to 3 years down the line, now I'm providing knowledge and wisdom along with the guests. Welcome to Process Podcast. What did that look like? I know you were inspired by both of those things, kind of. Share some of that.
I was a freshman in college, and I just had like a ton of extra time. I just decided,
which I'll make known, when you're in college, you have so much time. I'm like, I get you think you're busy, unless you're like a medical student or like an engineering major. Like if you're a business, finance, anything like that, I'm telling you, you have so much time. So start investing in yourself, start reading these self-improvement books, hit the gym, because you literally have hours on hours. Like I was a finance major and I look back now and it's like, man, I had so much time. But okay, keep going.
Yeah, and I was just like interested in going to the gym, and I feel like this hits home for a lot of, like beginners out there. I just felt so weird because of all these machines and not sure how they worked or like what routine to do. And, it's okay to not have it all figured out when you first go. And it's all about, following along the process and just showing up and just figuring out as you go, learning more about it, figuring out your routine. You can like
curiosity.
Yeah,
like spark that curiosity.
Is a huge part of it.
Oh, like, okay, I felt like I was hitting my shoulders, but now my whole back sore. Like what
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's
look it up. Look it up on YouTube. Look it up on ChatGPT.
Yeah, like I would go on like TikTok and look up like workouts, and I would just experiment. And I think that's like a big thing is just, trial and error, figuring out what works. And like going back to, I think, what like the anime thing like inspired me too, because we see like a big one that inspired me to go to the gym was Naruto, and seeing the story of Naruto, who like the kid who had nothing and he became the greatest ninja in the village. It's just so inspirational, and it's just like it was like hype to me. And it was like,
no, it really is. And like, if you don't like anime, probably skip a few minutes because we're going to dive into this and you might think it's nerdy. I really don't care. But basically, dude, Naruto is like the story of this kid who's underlooked and he's a troublemaker. And he's basically this troublemaker that all he's trying to do is get attention because he was parentless. And it dives into like the whole story of why he's parentless. And it pretty much ties the whole, it's over 1,000 episodes all together. And then there's another series called Boruto that goes on to it. But it's this kid living on a mission, and he starts meeting people who believe in him. But yeah, keep it. You go on like the story of Naruto and how it inspired you.
Yeah, so it's a kid who actually just grew up from nothing, and he had, even as a 12-year-old boy, he had this like fixed mindset of, I'm gonna be like the leader of the village.
Hokage,
Hokage. I'm gonna be the strongest in the village. I'll prove all you wrong. And we just see throughout the entire story, his trials and tribulations and how much he worked for that at the end of it. And he does become Hokage in Boruto, and it's just so inspirational. And it doesn't matter where any of us came from. Like if we have a desire, if we have a dream, we can go out and go make it. And like it inspired me of the way of Naruto. He worked for that. Like he didn't have talents. He wasn't expected of anything.
He trained every day, man.
Yeah.
He put his all into everything. And at the end of the day, I kind of laugh because in Boruto, I haven't watched all of Boruto, but basically the day of when he got initiated as Hokage came. I don't know if you know this, but basically he wasn't there. Yeah. He slept through it or something crazy. But seriously, it's matching the inputs, because if you don't put the inputs, like it doesn't. There's a scripture that I wish. See, this where I'm getting better at it. But basically, like if you don't work, God's like, I always believe that you put the inputs in and God will work as well. So like you got to do the works for God to work. And so that's what it comes down to, is like you have a dream, man. You got to pursue it with everything, but also realizing that your number one power, or like your number one like driver, is the Lord. So,
yeah, you got to sow the seeds, and it ties back to the locus of control. and
agency as well.
Exactly. I don't know if you talked about it on the show, but Hero on a Mission by Donald Miller talks about, a hero establishes their own agency where, like they understand like what of their life they can control, and they, let go of everything that they can't, and they, surrender that to the Lord. And, like we have, the ability to, like we can...
Any small thing, like wake up every morning at 6 a.m. We have the agency to decide that. But guess what? We don't have the agency to decide what gas is. Like if you're gonna get worked up about the gas, like why?
Yeah, it's like saying like, oh, I don't have time to go to the gym, but you wake up at 10:30. Like you like the other stuff that you have in your life, whatever appointments, school, you can't control when those things are, but you have the control to wake up 2 hours earlier, 3 hours earlier in order to make time for the gym.
Yeah. And so I would say something I don't say ever, because I used to say this, like I don't have time for this. And look, I would say 99 if you're still listening to this, well, I appreciate it. We're on like episode 11, but 99% of people watching this or listening to this, if you catch yourself saying like I'm too busy to do this or I don't have time, I guarantee you have time to make. That is something I won't say ever anymore. Is like I don't have time to do this, or I don't have. It's like no, that's just not a priority for me. Because look, at the end of the day, I can cut different things out. There's time that you spend on your phone. There's time here or there. There's priorities, and it's like if this is a priority for you, like okay, I'll start saying like, oh, you're not hitting the gym 6 days a week? And I'm like, yeah, it's not a priority for me. Not that I don't have time. So you got to, because, yeah, we do have a limited amount of time, but we also, like let's see, if I pack my whole schedule out with different things and someone's like, I'm trying to think of something, you want to go play golf, like, which I don't really enjoy golf anymore, but I'd play. It's like, no, like, golf is really not a priority. I'm spending money on something that is an experience, which is an experience I really don't care to have right now. So it's not that I don't have time. It's like it's not a priority for me. So I don't know if that makes sense, but literally I would try to take that out of your vocabulary in the self-improvement journey is I don't have time, because you can always make time. I think the things that really matter, you'll make time for. And so that's what I've started to realize is making, like, I was like, man, I got to make intentional time to spend time with the Lord every morning. Got to make intentional time to develop myself in different regards. So yeah, keep going.
Yeah. Like me and Palmer have the same 24 hours as, like Warren Buffett, like all these like massively influential people have. They have the same amount of time. And it's a matter of, the priorities that we set and the power that we give other things that determine, like that. So like our priorities are like the gym, the Lord, like that stuff would be hard set in our schedule, and other things like the smaller rocks, we can talk about that deeper.
Big rocks, small rocks.
Yeah. Yeah, so like there's an analogy where if you look at a jar, right, and if you fill it all with sand, the tiniest little things, you'll have no room for the big rocks, the important things in your life. And so when you want to fill it, you want to start with the big rocks first, because that way like those things are already in there, and then the small things fit around it.
Yeah, and so that's not an excuse why my laundry's been on my floor for a week, but but it kind of is, It's like I'll get to my laundry, I have clothes to wear, but I would used to think I was being productive when I was doing the laundry, doing the dishes, and it's like, yes, I need to get those things done, but no, it's not moving. It's not moving the needle on like growing my faith, or it's not. So it's like, okay, if I have an extra couple minutes here or there, like that's all it really takes, because you're gonna procrastinate on some things. So just really, you gotta. It's almost auditing your time. Dan Martell talks about it. Mm-hmm. You don't want to make yourself like life an audit, but it's like, okay, I don't have time. No. Just like look where you're spending it. Like, okay, screen time 7 hours. Well, there's 4 hours right there. You could prioritize towards something. So I don't know. It's a cool experience. Kind of, it's an ever evolving process. And the thing you said about Warren Buffett, I want to mention is it's a compounding effect too, right? Because Warren Buffett's lived so long. It's like a lot of people see these really successful older gentlemen or older ladies, and they're like, wow, look at what they've done. It's like, dude, because they've put the 1%, like they've gotten 1% better for days, for years. And it's like, we're still 22, 23, and you might fall upon, God might have plans that you hit prosperity or whatever goes well earlier than other people. But at the end of the day, compounding effect is inevitable to bring success. and not quitting, man. So
yeah, it's just like the commitment to always get better and always improve. Yeah, and it's just a matter of, like have this being, like having a sense of humility and understanding that, okay, I'm, I want to work on this. I want to, have more time for the Lord. And it's, it's like
doing it.
Yeah. It's just like, assessing your situation and having that growth mindset of, okay, like what can I do to improve?
Yeah. Dude, I'm enjoying this episode so much. I just gotta say that because this is like the most, I feel like, free flowing it's been, just like for me. And so I had one with the one with Corey last week, which was yesterday. So basically, dude, I was a little nervous, and it's because I wasn't able to build up this momentum because I didn't have a guest for almost a month, if not over. And so, dude, it's like this momentum thing, and having him on yesterday and then you on today, and I had a virtual one back with Luke, but you're getting, it's like this momentum, and so this is like just free flowing, and it's getting to where I want it to go. And so I just want to say that, but this conversation is amazing. And we're just touched on so many different little things, which is cool. But now I wanted to pull us back to the teaching, to the newsletter. What's this first newsletter about? Maybe it might be out by the time this podcast is out, so I'll probably share a link somewhere, hopefully, if I know how to do that. But, yeah, so dive into it because it's pretty cool. I'm about to read it thoroughly through in a second. But, yeah, share some of that.
Yes, I've been kind of formulating it the past, 2 weeks, just trying to, like, start off with a banger. It's very biblically rooted. So the main topic that it talks about was the duties that God entrusted into Adam, and as a symbol for like all of mankind, and how we can use that as a formula for how we go about life. And so the first thing that I want to touch on is, so the first piece of scripture in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And a lot of people don't realize this. I didn't realize this at first, but we learned that the first thing that God tells us about himself is that he is somebody who creates. He's creative. The first thing that God tells us about man is that man was created in God's image.
Ooh.
And so if man was created in God's image and God is somebody who's creative, we are naturally creative as well. And so diving into when, God creates Adam and Eve, he gives them 5 duties. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. And those can be broken down into 3 categories. So he says, be fruitful. So be is the first one. Then he gives them 3 actions, do's. And then the last one is to have dominion. So you could break it down into be, do, and have. And most people have it backwards.
They try to have, do, have, be. No, have, do, be.
Have, do, be, yeah.
Yeah.
They think, in my newsletter, I wrote, once I have more money, then I will take my girl on more dates and
I'll be happier.
I'll be happier. And
it's so crazy.
It's completely backwards where, everything that we have stems from our actions, which stems from our doing, our identity, our being at rather. And it's, if we want to have more, we need to do more. Therefore, we need to be more. And I go over a process on how we can be more than we are. And Myron Golden talks about this, and it's amazing. So a fruit from a plant comes from within itself. It comes from a seed that only grows out of its own self. And so we can only produce fruits because we only produce fruits that come from within.
So like the person we're being will produce fruit. Like we're not going to produce a fruit that we're not of, or like that's not of us. So if we're not like, if we don't see ourselves as, the kind of analogy I like to say is like, if someone was like, oh, I want to be a podcaster, right? But like, so it's like, well, I can be a podcaster. I'm trying to like see how I can say this, but I think you get what I'm saying. Like someone's like, oh, I want to be a podcaster, but like I can't because of this, and like I gotta have these things, or I don't have the resources. It's like, no, like you just have to be a podcaster.
Exactly.
Like, bro, start filming, put the cameras on. Same with influencer. It's like, okay, post 3 stories a week, do this, do that. It's like you are an influencer, and now it's like then you can do the things. I don't know, and then you're B. So I guess in this sense, sorry, I'm kind of wrapping my head thinking out loud, but yeah, you're B. So I am an influencer. Then you do the things to be an influencer. You post 5 stories a day, 3 posts a day, whatever. And then you have the things that influencers have eventually if you don't quit. And it's like that's versus I think it sounds simple when you're saying it out loud because like, oh, that makes sense. But I'm telling you that the majority, if not most people, operate out of the have, do, be. And that's why you see so many miserable people. And that's why you also see so few people reach success or a success on like the level, I guess a worldly success in a sense, but also spiritual success, because people are always looking for the next big thing instead of just being content in the present day or being an influencer or being like, use another example because I feel like you have some really good ones in the newsletter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, like tying it back, so like, like the fancy lighting and the camera setup doesn't make somebody a podcaster. It's, like it's what they do with the stuff that they have, like we can be podcasters just with our phones. And it's like
you can speak into your little voice memo and post it as an MP3 on Spotify.
Yeah. And it stems all from identity, and that identity influences action. Like what were you saying before?
Oh, I was diving into something, but basically like being these certain things, people are operating. Dude, I've seen the be do have in so many places. But so I just read a book called Holy Habits by Noah Herron, and I think maybe this is where I was going with it, but one of his habits, I would highly recommend this read. And so basically the reason I read it is because he came and preached at Radiant on Sunday a couple weeks ago, not this past weekend, but 2 weekends ago. And so his message was build the boat, and it was such a great message. It was talking about what boat are you building this year. Talked about Noah's Ark, basically how he was called to build this boat. He finished the works, and he did it for 140 years, biblical scholars believe, which is crazy. That's like, talk about finishing the work and something you're called to. Anyways, he had a book called Holy Habits, and I resonated with the message so much, and I just saw him on stage. So I was like, man, I really want to read this book. And so I started reading it. Well, it's an easy read. It's like 165, 70 pages, but I also just saw him, so I was like, I resonate with this guy. I'm going to read it now. I had a couple other books I was reading, paused them all. So it's 10 holy habits, small habits you can implement into every day to become more holy, which is so cool. But one of the habits is celebrate everything. And so it's a lot of people try to derive happiness from when I get to this next thing. And I've talked about it on this podcast, I think, a couple of times, but that's the operation I was operating out of with my OCD. When I fix this OCD, then I'll be able to be in a relationship, then I'll be happy, or some things like that. When I fix this OCD, then I'll be at peace, then I'll be happy. And it was like always like I couldn't. It's like now I'm like, man, this OCD is what makes me. I love myself. Now I'm just content right where I'm at. But also I've just like finding content in every day, so we celebrate everything. And so I love this phrase, but he said basically his wife, Maddie, throws confetti, like throw confetti. And so the example he used is they go to this concert, and this lady's singing, or I forget who it was, maybe it was like, maybe Taylor Swift, I don't know, some big artist. But they get into the line late, and it's a 2 or 3 hour wait. And so she, like his wife, Maddie, was like, at least we can like sit in line and we can talk about the lyrics and like kind of finish the lyrics and get all hyped up for the songs. And her friend goes, well, of course, like Maddie would throw confetti in this situation and find it. And Noah's like, throw confetti? Like, what does that mean? Because he didn't know at that point. He's like, well, if you haven't noticed yet, Noah, your wife likes to throw confetti, which means seeing the good in every situation, no matter what it is. And it's like, man, and so there was a study he quoted basically that said people that are the happiest and find the most joy, find the joy in the small things, find the joy in everyday life, versus the people who are always striving for the next thing, the have, I guess, in this sense, they're always like aspiring. They're not happy. They get that goal, that car, that amount of money, whatever it is, and that makes them a little bit happy, but it drops their level of joy or happiness drops right back down, and they're not content, bro. And I think living with contentness and being able to find the small moments. Well, one, like, dude, shooting this podcast with you, like, bro, I'm so content, like, just so present right now. It's just amazing. And every time I hop on the pod, it's just like, and so I was like, the worldly success is, but like, this is success, this is content, this is being right now in this present moment. We talked about this the other day at Hyde Park when we were just sitting there. It's like, just being here, that was just like so cool. But anyways, that's my point, is that if you can just be in the present moment and find joy in the small things, like, a lot of the times that isn't going to be as like crucial. If you can just be there, then that's where you're going to find the most happiness. And in return, that's when you can just trust the Lord with the plans that you'll have what you need. So it's like, I guess the biggest B, in my opinion, is being a person of Christ, being like someone who lives the truth and reflects the light.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because, like, all we have is the present moment. Like, the past and the future. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future has yet to exist. And all we have is the present moment. So so many of us are fixated on, we're very...
If this happens, or when this happens.
We talked about this at Hyde Park too. Like, so many of us are, regretful about the things we've done, the people that, the stuff that's happened, or we're so anxious about the future. Like, let those...
There's a time and place to think of them, is like what I like to say. Is like, you should try to spend 5 to 10% of your time and each in the past and the present to reflect and grow on the things that have happened, so you can learn lessons from them and like see like, oh, where did I feel conviction? Where did I have to repent? And then also look at the future in a sense and say, okay, what are God's visions? What are God's plans for the future? Because that's important too. But guess what? If you're not all there when you're present, like, you have to be all there when you're all there. Like, there's a time and place to be in the past and the future.
Yeah. Because that mindset allows you to bring those experiences, and use them for like your being in the present moment and how you act on a day-to-day basis. And it's, so many people, we talked about this too, we call it, like, I would say, like, they're dim lights, where, like, they're on, but they're not like fully 100%. And when we talk about being in the present moment, like, we have to be 100% in anything we do.
Or zero.
Yeah, it's either on or off.
So this is actually from Andrew Tate in a sense, and so whether you agree with what he says or not, I found this very helpful. And he kind of says, I'm either 100% on or I'm 0%. I'm fully off, because if you're 50% on all the time, your work, your deep work, whatever what you're working on is not going to reap like all that you can put into it. And if you're not all the way off, you're 50% on, so thinking about the work task that you have tomorrow or like tonight, it's like you're not going to fully rest either. And so I think I'm actually going to create a whole episode on this when it's going to be like living with intention. It's a plan for mine, is creating one episode on this. But basically, being intentional stems from, one, I guess, making a decision to do something or being intentional about it. But I think it stems from the schedule you create. And so being intentional with your rest, like, not just because someone might look at my schedule and be like, man, why are you scheduling a time to watch a movie for an hour or two? And it's like, well, if I didn't schedule that 2 hours to really just watch that movie, I'm not going to be able to rest fully, because I know there's a lot of things I want to work on. And so, but if I make that time to just fully, hey, I can do nothing, or I can watch this movie, or I can read a book and not have to, and I can put everything aside, that's when I'll be able to fully put my light to zero and relax. Because if I don't do that, my head works in a way where I overthink, or I'm like, you should be doing this right now. You should. And I've gotten away from that a lot as I've grown spiritually and as I've grown personally as well, like all in one. But yeah, man. So I block being intentional with your schedule. Like, you say your priority is spending time with your kids, your fiance, your girlfriend, or whatever it might be, or walking your dog. But then it's like you don't do it, and it's like, why? Well, it's not on the schedule. And so someone might look at a schedule and be like, why is your schedule so detailed? And it's like, because I'm being intentional with where I'm spending my time. And yeah, so
it allows you not to worry about, anything else going in your life, because it's already there. And it's like this, like, I had this realization too.
You can be more present, because like, oh, this is all I have to focus on.
Exactly. Like, you already, you already like got that stuff either done or you have set time for it that you made. So now you don't need to worry about it, and it doesn't take up as much mental real estate. You lose that anxiety that you would have, because it's always in the back of my mind where, I mean, I had this in school because I didn't learn this at the time, but it's like, oh, I had this assignment that I have to do.
I might forget about it, or
yeah, like I don't want to forget, like I have to go do this when I get home or like whatever. But it's like if you do the work ahead of time, you plan out your schedule, your to-do list. It's like you outsource a lot of the thinking so that you can just take that stuff that's so crammed in your mind and just put it out on paper so that you can just be in the present moment.
Yeah, I love that. And it was reminding me of something from Dan Martell, but I just blanked on it. But yeah, it really is just like you're saying it in ways that I haven't thought of it before, but just laying it out so it's all kind of spaced there. So then when like all you have to do is look at your Google Calendar, and it's like, okay, this time block is for this. And so for me, I've been trying to schedule every Sunday and then kind of tweak it when I need to. This is what I was gonna say. So Dan Martell talks about, or like even just like at this point, I kind of speak about is just being compliant with that schedule. Give yourself grace. Like we're not perfect. Like if you miss something, that's fine. But also being compliant with that schedule is a key, because and this resonates with me from a podcast, Chris Williamson, someone like a podcaster I kind of look up to. But he's like, thinking about the thing isn't doing the thing, planning the thing isn't doing the thing, scheduling the thing, talking about doing the thing isn't the thing, talking about like what you could get from the thing. It's like doing the thing is the only thing that's doing the thing. So scheduling is great, but now you got to be compliant when that pops up on the Google Calendar. Like read this book. It's like, okay, well, if you don't do it, then the schedule, you're not being intentional now because you're not doing the thing. But also it does clear up your mind. Like that scheduling, making time for that is so crucial, because now you can like let your mind relax, and then when it's a time, be compliant.
If you do that ahead of time, it allows you, when you have the time to do the thing, to go all in, to do that thing 100%, no exhaustion. Like there's a mentor who I would listen to his podcast. His name is Jeff Logan II. He's an actor, an entrepreneur. He owns 2 companies. He has, 2 children. He's in music videos, and he was interviewed for like live TV once, and the woman asked, how do you do it? How do you juggle all these things? And he says, what I do is I surrender to the moment. And it's, crucial where, we need to understand that although we have all this stuff going on, we just have to, put that aside and just surrender into what we're doing and just, commit to it.
Yeah, and it's so hard. I think the stat was at one of our services that like 46.2% of people are only living in the moment half the time, or like half of the people are only living presently 46.2% of their life. And it's so hard to like say be present. But then I think when you you can look at your life and really recognize when you're present, when you're not thinking about anything else, like a conversation like this. Like I think we mentioned it at Hyde Park the other day, we were just like focused on that present moment. But it's easy to get distracted, especially when you're by yourself too, because I think it's like easy to start getting into worries and fears and all these different things. But yeah, I mean, I feel
it's the point that I just thought of. It gets a little bit like metaphysical, but I talked about the power of now earlier, and that entire book is all about, like the present moment and like the now. And Eckhart Tolle, he's a spiritual teacher, and a lot of the book brings up biblical aspects, and he talks about how like the present moment is the only time you could find God, because I'm pretty sure it's Hebrew where God means Yahweh, and Yahweh's I am. And like I am is present tense, which means that you can only find God in the present moment. You can't you can't search in the past or the future. He is, he was, and he will always be.
Oh, I think that's on my shirt. Yo, I just got a new shirt. It's like some Australian company. It's called like Generation Clothing. I mean, obviously, I don't have any sponsor or anything. This is literally just like I'm wearing it right now. It is sick, so you should check them out on whatever. But that scripture is literally on my back right now. So yeah, he is, he was, And what he is all there ever will be.
Yeah,
I could stand up.
Pretty much.
Yeah, why not, dude? The thing is, I'd usually be like, oh, I'm not gonna stand up and show up, but I'll show it because like now I'm just who cares, man. So
yeah.
Basically, yeah. So what does it read it?
I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is and who was and who is to come, the Almighty.
Yeah, and what's it from?
Revelations 1:8.
Yeah. So, anyways, the shirt is absolutely fire. I got one more coming from them. But anyways, Revelation 1:8. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a super cool scripture, and that just calls on like the presence of. Oh, I'm gonna mention another habit because I just read this Holy Habits book and it's so good. I think I talked about it last night at our Bible study. But sit in silence. Ooh, this is gonna bring up a really big topic for me because I found it so true. So where do I even start? So sitting in silence, man, it talks about the importance of making this a habit in your everyday life because Jesus isn't a Band-Aid. He doesn't want, a lot of times people in life, I feel like I'm speaking in rapid mode, but a lot of times people in life are going to cover up all their pain and all their insecurities and everything. They're going to just shove it to the subconscious because they start to just cover it with distractions and the next thing and what is on their to-do list. And so Jesus is a Band-Aid in a sense, like their relationship is very shallow with him and that they're just covering all these things up by the next distraction, the next thing. And bro, I found myself doing it. And sometimes, I don't know, it's not always bad, but in the book, and Noah says, Jesus wants to be a surgeon. He wants to work so deep in you that you like are transformed, that you're a whole different person. He does that deep work. And the only way sometimes we can do that is to quiet the distractions, to sit in silence. And so he talks about a couple of different ways to do it, but just turn it like when you're driving to work in the car. When's the last time you probably actually drove to work with no music? Me, almost never. But same thing with like if you're cooking food, you're probably throwing on some music. And it's like now we're in a day in society where I don't see anyone who just sits in silence almost regularly. So he talks about one of the big things he does is go in the nature or nature walks and sit in silence or like walk in silence per se. But that's going to allow those like inner questions or those insecurities or those subconscious things that are popping up for you to deal with them. I forget how I'm even getting into this, but basically, it's just this habit of sitting in silence. I feel like today our attention spans are so low, and so we're always needing the next like click of dopamine or that next song. And so that's something I've been trying to implement into my life is just whether it's reading books. I know I'm reading, but like that's silence in a sense. And it's just being able to find peace in the silence because for the longest time, man, I was distracting myself with every next thing, the gym, this, that, because you don't want to address those things that God wants to do the deep work on and really make real transformation. That goes to, I think, what you were saying with like just sitting at peace or like quietly.
Yeah, like today, there's so much noise in today's world, and it's drowned out that inner voice that we have, the voice of God that's within. And I mean, tying it back to the power of now.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. That you're only going to find God at the present moment. And so I find, sorry. You just reminded me of how I was drawing, I was connecting dots. But that like prayer, meditation, and sitting in silence is how you're really going to connect with the Lord and how he's going to do that deep work in you. So yeah, sorry. That was what I was connecting.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to get too nitty gritty, but the power of now like explains, why like the silence is the Lord's presence.
Ooh.
So from what I remember of the book, so God is everything and nothing. So it's like if you remove like all these distractions and you just sit in absolute nothingness, that in itself is the presence of the Lord. And it's like that's why that's why silence is so important because like that is removing all worldly distractions. And there's a speaker who talks about this too, but not in a biblical sense. It is biblical, but I don't think he meant to be biblical. His name is Jim Rohn. He was the mentor to Tony Robbins, and he was very big in the personal development world. If you have a question that you're trying to figure out or a problem that you have, he calls it go into the silence, where sit for 20 to 30 minutes in just complete silence. And he said, I guarantee you'll find the answer. And that in itself from,
Spirit speaking to you,
exactly,
man. You're
leaving men of Christ, that is, the Lord bringing that answer to light.
Dang, dude, I've heard that before too. I think it actually was in a biblical sense from whoever I heard it from, but it's true. And I'm not going to lie, I don't think I've ever done it. So that's something I need to do more is just sit in silence. Oh, and so this, yeah, it reminds me, I was reading 1 Kings. I think I finished 1 Kings yesterday, and it talks about, I don't know the exact story, but basically there was like a fire and there was a storm, but like at the end of the day, God was in the still small voice after all of it. He wasn't in the fire, and I wish I you can't remember everything in the Word, especially the first time reading it. So this is the first time I'm going cover to cover in the Word, but basically, yeah, man, God's voice is going to be found in that. It's that still small voice when you can quiet out all the noise, when you can spend time deep in prayer in that resting spot of that prayer closet. And that's something I've just done recently is, I'd pray out in my living room or whatever, but I've made that place of rest where like the Lord can rest, and I can go into that prayer closet and like really find peace there and like silence and just pray there. And so I don't know. It's been cool. And dude, any last kind of topics you want to touch on? I feel like we've had like a pretty crazy but great conversation, free flowing.
I guess, I mean, the last thing that I want to say is, so much because the episode's so good, but
I forgot I have some of the questions from the process. I forgot. So I have some more questions for you.
Go ahead. Let's do it.
Okay, I'll let you save that last thing for like the end. But dude, as y'all know, we have some process questions, some questions that we have on most episodes of the process. But I want to, we've talked a lot on some different subjects, but diving into Matt's life a little bit and relating to people and these lessons that he can eventually teach. But like, what's like the toughest adversity you'd say you've had to face in your life so far? And did you see a positive outcome from it? Maybe not. Maybe you're still going through it. Like, what's that looked like? So, the audience can relate.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been very fortunate in my life where I didn't really grow up in tough times. Like my mom and dad were very hardworking people and gave me and my siblings a great life and a great childhood. A lot of, my struggles, I know that there's more to come. And I wouldn't say they're bad by any means. So it was, juggling a lot of the priorities that I had while in school was probably like my biggest challenge so far. I was working full time as a bartender. I was a full-time student. I had a girlfriend, and I also had to make time for the gym and my business. And that's what's really like tapped me into, the importance of time and attention and, managing that time and being a steward of your time. And that's, that got me into, a passion of mine, which is just, productivity and making like the most of your time so that you can spend it with the people and the things that you find the most valuable.
No, that's amazing. And I think, I always say this on this podcast, but basically everyone's dealt different cards, man, and everyone's like one situation doesn't invalidate another situation. So that's super cool. And I've talked to you a lot about just like being intentional with your time and how much you've learned just in the last few months, but also just like throughout college, being able to balance those things. Because, dude, every time you like go to that next stage of life or that different part of life, it's like you learn a new thing and you kind of get challenged with new challenges, like how to balance this part. And like, there's never going to be a full balance of life, but it's going to be like, how do I manage this? How do I spend intentional time in my priorities versus things that might be, I'm not controlling or prioritizing them. Like things are kind of getting a grip on me. Cause at the end of the day, you got to be the person that's controlling your time, where you're spending it, who you're spending it with, all those things. And that's going to be the key. So I appreciate that. And so, hopefully the first newsletter will be out before this. So this is going out in a week and a half or two. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like in the next couple of days, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna launch it not where I plan to launch it, because I plan to launch it.
Beehive? Was that where you're gonna
go? through an email newsletter. But since like I have no subscribers, I'm gonna probably put it on an article platform called Medium. And then make that into a YouTube post too, like just a raw,
like you speaking.
Yeah, just me and the camera just talking about that.
That's fire. So I asked that question as one. Well, that's sweet. So go check that out, and then also you'll have some subscribers. I'll be there. But no, I asked that question. So like, what's your why? Like what is your why behind all this? Where do you see yourself going? Like first newsletter's going out, so obviously aspiring to new things. But why do you do it all? What drives you? Self-improvement journey and all. faith, everything.
Yeah, I've really, I've had to ask that question to myself multiple times about why I'm doing the things that I do. I think I was just, given like from the Lord, like so much grace on this earth. And I think that, like I've been given this life to not, let it go to waste. And I think it's in God's best wishes.
You're stewarding the life, bro. You're dying to yourself.
Exactly. Like I feel like it's my duty to become the best version of myself to, we're all created in images of God. So I feel like it would be a disservice to not constantly improve, to try to be like him and like Christ as much as possible. So it's like everything that I do, I want to be, when it comes to teaching, like Christ was a teacher, and everything that I do, like I try to improve and I try to get better at, and I always want to be like better than the person that I was yesterday.
Ooh, I think you have it in your bio, if I remember correctly. But Kaizen, it's like 1% every day, and that's really what self-improvement journey is. And not saying you're not going to take a step backwards, but it's like when you do take a step backwards, just make sure the next day is forwards, and then you keep going and you keep going. And so that leads me to a couple more questions I kind of want to dive into. Just I think it will be cool to the listeners to hear it out after hearing kind of some insights from you and like how you've taken this journey in self-improvement and are obviously still continuing on in this 1% every day thing. But what was some advice would you say to the audience who maybe they're 18, maybe they're 19, whatever, maybe your younger self, like, hey, I'm getting into this. This is maybe the first podcast I've listened to. I've read a book. What's next? What's that advice?
One thing that I would say, actually it ties into a few things, but give yourself some grace. Don't feel like you have to have everything figured out. When I was in high school, I had my parents and my friends' parents, down my throat asking me what I wanted to do growing up. And
you're going to have everyone doing that your whole life, bro. And then and if you take your own path, we were talking to Diego yesterday. I don't think you were quite there yet. Mm-hmm. But dude, he had like a job at Sherwin-Williams. Sorry to interrupt this, but this is so true. And he was like Sherwin-Williams 2 years, 3 years, and his pay was pretty good. And then he was like, I'm moving to Tampa to work full time for Strength. And he was like, everyone I know is like, what are you doing? And it's like people are gonna ask you, like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And then when you say an answer that's not kind of conforming to the world, everyone's gonna say, what are you doing? And it's like, but having just belief and confidence in yourself and stepping out.
Yeah, like a side note to that too, like we talked about, like Noah building the boat. And he did it for 140 years, and everybody that he knew looked at him like crazy. Like, what are you doing? And you gotta, trust the process and like understand that God, like the calling that God wants you to do may not come to you until it's time to. And you just have to have that faith that, like God has a plan for you. And, you may not know it now, but you will eventually.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say I listened to a podcast with JP Pokluda talking about like, what is my calling? How do I know if something is my calling? I forget exactly. It's in the later 200s of his episodes. But I would say listen to that because it talks about how everyone's trying to ask for their specific callings from God. Like, oh, God, like, what is my specific calling? What are you calling me to do? And it's like, well, first, are you living like the generic calling or will of God? It's like, so you really got to dive in and look at like what the word, I don't want to go off the top of my head basically right now, but basically look at the generic calling of what God calls us to do as people, and then okay, am I doing those things? And then you can like look a little bit more for like a specific calling, but first be like, am I fulfilling the generic will of God? And so it's the last thing I'll leave us with before you kind of give your last notes to the audience or the last discussions. But what's a habits, routines that you implement every day? Maybe help you, get into reading, getting into the Word. What are some things you implement? What's a day look like in your life? Obviously, both working the schedules we work, very. You got to be adaptable in a sense. So you got to adapt day to day. What's my schedule look like? Planning out once you get your schedule. Hey, now I can kind of go around that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So like where we work, it's, you got to like take it on the week by week basis. But one thing that I will say that like you're very much good at it, and it's like in the morning time is the most important time probably out of your entire day. People say if you win the morning, you win the day. And the morning, I mean, so many people talk about this, is it you started out right, because that'll, like it's a domino effect throughout your whole day. And Tony Robbins talks about this. It's about like he calls it priming. And what priming is getting your mind right, your spirit right, because he says like if you it's like
you're basically like getting your priming it can be used in a lot of terms, but it's basically getting ready for the work that's about to be done or for the day.
It's preparing yourself. And like for us, it's, like spending time with the Lord and, like spending time with the Lord and the Word. And that will help. Let's, building our foundation. And, people prime too with like, like cold plunging or changing their state. And, because a lot of times when we wake up, we're so groggy and we're so like, we don't want to get up. We have like all these, temptations, and it's like we want to set ourselves up for the progress that we need to make.
Yeah, and that's something in my life I'm working on right now, is that priming and that getting up when the alarm hits. And sometimes I'm a little too ambitious at night, right? Because we have the energy at night. We're still kind of like, if you're not like dead tired, you're like, oh man, like I have some energy. I can still usually fall asleep, but I'm like, man, I can wake up at 6 a.m. tomorrow, even though it's like 3 a.m. It's like 3 a.m. Like, oh, I can wake up at 6 tomorrow. I can get the day going. But dude, I'm gonna tell you what, you need sleep. So it's like, I set myself up for failure a lot the night before because I am way too ambitious with the time I need to wake up. And so the thing I'll say with like this priming the morning, starting off the morning right, 100%. But don't get stuck in this loop where you see, because this is something with the self-improvement journey, sometimes you start to compare yourself to like the Gogginses of the world, and like don't do that, because you might see him like, oh, I don't care what time I go to bed, I'm waking up at 5 a.m. And like, okay, maybe if you're David Goggins, sure, but like we're not all David Goggins, and that's the thing I don't think I realized for so long. So the thing I want to say is make sure you get your sleep and prime that morning. But if you go to bed at 3 a.m. because your job goes till 2 a.m., sleep till 10 a.m., 10:30, and then prime your morning and prime your day. Get ready for your day. Spend the time with the Lord then, because it's easy to get wrapped up in the self-improvement loop and start comparing. But at the end of the day, I'm not David Goggins, and if I try to be him, it's not gonna go well, because I'm not, one, being authentically me, and the things that might work for him might not work for me. I'm not built like him. I mean, I can honestly admit that. But also, I'm built differently than him. So it's not bad that I'm not built like him. I'm built as my authentic self, and I got to find my strengths, not his. So
yeah, it all stems from within. And it's, like God created all of us to be unique. And it's like we see people that, that we want to emulate, but they're not us. They don't have our skills. They don't have our strengths.
Our gifts,
our gifts,
according to the grace given to each of us. So God's given grace to each of us, different gifts to each of us. So, man, any last words for the audience? That was a banger of an episode. I really enjoyed it. So,
yeah. Last thing I think is, this is a big struggle that I had, but I'll keep this brief. I was always influenced by other people's thinking as a kid. So one thing I would say is, like, stay curious, question everything, try to learn from all different perspectives, and then make your own decisions. I would hear advice from one person and then stick with them. But yeah, you need to be able to take advice from all different types of people and then turn that into your own.
I like to say like the grain of salt. Like it's basically the grain of salt method. I'll make it up. But basically, yeah, hear what everyone has to say and take it with a grain of salt. And then maybe implement it, maybe don't, but think about it, and then make your own opinions.
Yeah, and then you start building your own foundation, and then you see something that like drastically contradicts your worldview, and you're so strong in what you've built in that you're able to withstand that and like respect other people's beliefs.
Yeah, you can hear it out. You can actually analyze it analytically and be like, "Yo, I hear you out. I hear all these reasons. I still don't see eye to eye with that." And I think that's the most powerful thing, is being able to do that. And a lot of people, it takes a lot of time to build up to that point. So that's a great last message, but that's the end. What's your Twitter, Instagram? People can go follow you there.
Yeah, so my Twitter is just Matthew Ferrone, and then Instagram is matt.ferrone. You can check out me on both those platforms.
Do you have a YouTube yet? Do you know?
Not yet. I mean,
All right, that's the goal for today. Once this newsletter is made, YouTube will be up. Probably Matt Ferrone or something like that. You'll find him. But that was episode 11 of the podcast with Matt. Absolutely great episode. I feel like he just helped me grow as a podcaster in a sense in this episode alone. So I thank him for that. Thank him for being one of my friends. And that's the Process Podcast. Peace.